Humongous Entertainment was a big part of my childhood, as it was a big part of many people's childhoods. For middle to lower income families getting their first home PCs during the age in which home PCs were starting to become more affordable to pretty much everyone, they made that their niche. Kids and families looking to play games on this newfangled technology, but didn't have PCs powerful enough to run more advanced games. So their brand of junior adventure games were perfect for their space and time. I already covered the overall history of Humongous Entertainment in this video, check it out, it's very good. But now I decided I would rank these games from worst to best, so this is every junior adventure game ranked from worst to best. Now keep in mind, this is specifically relegated to just the junior adventure games, as in only the games that fall under that label. So spin-off games, the Blue's Clues games, the sports games, or those big thinker games don't count as they don't fall under this label. Also keep in mind that because most of these games are pretty similar as far as game design is concerned, outside of the bottom two there isn't much of a gulf between the top and the bottom of the list. It's really just going to be minor X factors that determine the difference here. So let's get started. But before I do, I just wanted to say a big thank you to this video's sponsor, Manta Sleep. I'm actually a customer of Manta Sleep because they do sleep masks better than any other company I've ever bought from. Their sleep masks are designed with detachable cups that fit around the eyes to block out all light while still being comfortable even while sleeping on your side, as well as an adjustable strap to give you a nice snug fit to your preference so you don't find it halfway down your face in the middle of the night. But the padded strap is also comfortable for sleep in pretty much any position. Manta Sleep has a range of sleep masks depending on your sleep preferences, including a weighted mask, a mask with cooling eye cups, and even a mask with built-in Bluetooth headphones, so if you're like me and you like to fall asleep while listening to your favorite podcasts, you can do that without the awkwardness of wearing headphones in bed. Each of these masks are comfortable and high quality, and right now, if you buy from my affiliate link on this video, you'll get a special 10% discount. Just scroll down and click on the tagged product and you get 10% off. It's that simple. Optionally, you can also go to their website and use the code BACON at checkout for the same 10% discount. That's mantasleep.com with the code BACON at checkout. Thank you to Manta Sleep once again for sponsoring today's video. Personally, I couldn't not put Pajama Sam 4 at the bottom of the list, even though the reasons for it being what it is are entirely justifiable. This was in 2003. This was after the founding members had left the company, and this was after a significant chunk of the staff had been laid off. This was also after Atari had taken over, who allowed the staff to make a couple of new junior adventure games, but also gave them very little budget to work with. Suffice it to say, the fact that this game exists at all is kind of amazing. But it just completely lost the spark and the charm the series was known for. It feels so unbelievably uninspired. The theming is wishy-washy, the puzzles are really uninspired, the pacing feels lackadaisical, the voice acting is beyond amateurish. The creativity and spark just isn't there, and the game just kind of ends when it's all said and done. In honestly a more jarring way than any other game that has a sudden ending in this catalog. There is some definite effort put on display here, such as that elaborate musical number, but it feels like misplaced effort when the rest of the game is so painfully mediocre. It's one of those cases where on the surface it may not look unbelievably bad, but it loses a lot of its quality in the subtleties. The little creative touches, which is what happens when you fire half your development staff. It's unfortunate, but it is the way it is. Pajama Sam 4 has none of the qualities that the older games had. Putt-Putt 7, otherwise known as Pep's Birthday Surprise, came out on the same day as Pajama Sam 4, and admittedly it has the same issues as Pajama Sam 4, especially in the voice acting, which is somehow even more amateurish.
I know an autograph is just somebody writing their name, but if I'm gonna meet Pajama Man, I've gotta have just the right thing for him to sign.
I got the eggs you needed for Pep's birthday cake.
But it does come out slightly better on account of having slightly better design. It does have a repetition issue in that you have to keep distracting Pep, which means you have to go through the same song and dance multiple times to talk to a character multiple times. Ultimately, this game did manage to maintain a little bit more of those intangible elements which made the original run of Putt-Putt games as charming as they were, but it still definitely feels like it lost a step. Like this was definitely a project that was made more out of obligation than anything else. The tone and mood feels off in a way that's hard to articulate. Largely uninspired design, uninspired puzzles, uninspired characters, uninspired everything. It feels like an attempt to try and capture something that another creator made instead of a natural progression made by said creator. And it feels so painfully mediocre. Also, I hate these last two entries for how much of a pain in the ass they are to run on their modern releases. Oof. Putt-Putt Travels Through Time is kind of an annoying game if I'm being honest. And that's for one simple reason. This game's gimmick has you traveling to 4 separate time periods, but there's no way to travel between them without returning to the main hub. Which means in order to solve multiple puzzles in this game, you have to go through like 12 screen transitions. And that's only assuming you know what to do. Like for example, when I was trying to figure out what to do with this bowl, I was traveling through multiple time periods to rule out different possibilities. Which led to me having to do something like 30 to 40 screen transitions before I figured out where it went. All because they didn't give you the ability to seamlessly travel between time periods. I'd like a more interconnected world is my point. So make sure you don't break your escape key to skip animations while playing this game because my god, you're going to be doing it a lot. Other than that, I guess it's alright. It does some fun things with the different time periods, and I especially enjoy how weird the future time period can get. It's a relatively straightforward sequence of puzzles outside of that one aspect of the pace grinding to a halt every time I need to go to a different era, and one catastrophic issue can be the difference maker when the quality is this universal. In my estimation, the entire game, no matter how good, falls to this one issue. Plus, it's also another one of those games that just kind of ends because it doesn't have a final sequence to pay everything off. Incidentally, I'm gonna mention this here because otherwise I'll never be able to talk about it. I remember during my retrospective, I mentioned this one dinosaur with a weirdly suggestive voice.
That strange something happens to be my tail, Putt-Putt.
A lot of people were quick to point out that she not only has a suggestive voice, but she's also giving you bedroom eyes. Which, yeah, she totally is. What can I say though, I've had weirder hear me outs. Freddi Fish 2: The Case of the Haunted Schoolhouse is easily the weakest of the Freddi Fish series, mostly because it's a somewhat less interesting retread of the first game. It has all the same villains and the same general plots, only in this case it has a story with far lower stakes. I speculated that they essentially made this as a do-over of the first game because the subject matter of the first game was somewhat off-puttingly intense. But either way, gun to my head, I could not remember much about this game without looking at the footage. Most of these games are memorable enough that I can remember at least a good chunk of them just off the top of my head, but between the opening and the ending of this game, it's all white noise to me. And because the game is leading up to laying a trap, it ends very suddenly. I don't consider this bad, just kind of painfully mediocre. As much as it pains me to do this, I think Pajama Sam 3, You Are What You Eat From Your Head to Your Feet, is among the weakest of the junior adventure games, because I feel like it really misses the mark in a lot of ways. It's the one that I played the most as a kid, and that's why this hurts me so. Unfortunately, the killer flaw with this game is that there's very little variance. Something that almost the entire catalog of games can boast is having several different unique playthroughs, each with a different set of puzzles. Some of these games have something like 6 different playthroughs worth of different content. Unfortunately, Pajama Sam 3 only has 2 playthroughs worth of content, and you can mix and match which ones you want to do, but that doesn't change the fact that it is somewhat vapid in this sense, and even worse is the fact that until about a third of the way through the game, every single playthrough is exactly the same no matter what you pick. You always have to escape jail, you always have to go to the food pyramid, you always have to feed this thing fries with his preferred sauce. So it's one of the least varied games in the entire catalog, and even once you get down to the actual puzzles, a lot of them are somewhat mid even by the standards of these games. Some of these puzzles take like 6 clicks, and when it's not that, they have a number of annoying mandatory arcade sequences. So as much as it pains me, I have to put this near the bottom. It's simply not a good representation of what this company's work has to offer in spite of the charming characters and fun personality. Fatty Bear's Birthday Surprise was the only junior adventure game to never result in a series of games, and I can honestly see why. In this case, a little girl's teddy bear comes to life on the eve of her birthday and wants to bake her a special cake. almost as if capturing that feeling of a child going to bed and waking up with something special happening, and having to mentally find a solution more complicated than your parents stayed up late. It feels very mundane and very sleepy in a genre of games that usually requires more outlandish concepts and a faster pace. The anarchic aspects of these games are partially what make them so fun, and when you set everything in just a regular residential house, it can only get so creative. And I found the pace was slow, the puzzles were fine but not particularly great, the variety isn't there, and Fatty Bear himself comes across as a bit too subdued.
Hey, you can't take my chocolate chips.
This is one of those games that you kind of play for the sake of completion, so you can play the entire catalog of junior adventure games, and this is definitely the odd one out. And personally, I think the best part of this game is being able to design a cake. One of only 2 games where you get to do that. It's definitely the weakest of all the games that don't have anything specifically wrong with them, because it's just an overall sense of meh. So this is the point where the games go from being flawed to being at the very least okay. Putt-Putt Joins the Parade was the first game that Humongous Entertainment ever made, and it was pretty decent, but it definitely wasn't up to par with the games they later made. First of all, it was still a few games before they would switch from sprite-based artwork to hand-animated artwork. As a result, the game looks a bit weird, especially as it relates to Putt-Putt's weird smile that's plastered on his face 24/7. Dude looks like a serial killer. Second of all, the game's very short. If you know what you're doing, you can finish it in 20 minutes. I didn't know what I was doing, and I still managed to beat it in 30, which is about half the length of the average Humongous Entertainment game. Third of all, you have that annoying gas mechanic, where you have to keep occasionally going to the gas station to refill your tank, depending on how long it's taking you to beat the game. I don't know what the penalty is for letting your gas run out, I never let it get to that point. But it is still a bit annoying. With that said, there is a freeform element to this game, and how the lion's share of gameplay is about having to get money together, and how you do that is up to you. Plus, it still has the same charm and personality that the series and the company was known for. The whole thing about clicking on the background to get random things to happen was an established thing right from the word go, but it's definitely primitive compared to what would come later. They knew which direction they were driving, but they weren't quite at their destination just yet. But hey, you do rescue a puppy, and that makes this game an instant classic. Putt-Putt Enters the Race is sort of a pseudo-remake of the first Putt-Putt game in the sense that there's this big event in your town and you have to prepare for said event by gathering a bunch of items to be able to participate in said thing. In this case, you need to gather a bunch of items that will allow you to enter the race. This is an extremely straightforward game with an extremely straightforward series of puzzles. There is one annoying part where you have to dig up a plot of land, and I couldn't figure out what the hint was about where to dig, so I found myself digging in the entire area. But otherwise, it's a decent little romp, nothing too crazy. A few good puzzles here and there, some fun characters, nothing you wouldn't expect. And it's simultaneously elevated and lowered by its ending, because a common issue with the Putt-Putt series, as I said, is the lack of payoff. Because usually, once you solve all the puzzles in a game, the game just ends unceremoniously, whereas this does have a climax. Unfortunately, it's a whack-ass minigame where you have to play the race. It's not too hard once you get out in front, but it's still vapid and fiddly. Arcade sequences in graphic adventure games have never been good, and while Humongous Entertainment were usually good at making them optional or simple enough that you don't need to think about them, this is a case where it was neither, and I think the game is slightly worse off for it. Putt-Putt Goes to the Moon is a marked improvement over the first game, even if going to space after one whole game is a bit ridiculous. In spite of the fact that the sprite-based visuals are still odd-looking, the rest of the game is a step up, featuring far more and far more elaborate puzzles. The highlight of which would be having to reach the steering wheel on a cliff. There are a few annoying puzzles though, such as the puzzle that requires you to play an arduous minigame a couple of times, and that one puzzle that amounts to going door to door to try and find where Robbie Radar is, which is just busy work. Both of those puzzles can go fuck themselves, but the fact that this is in space leads to a lot of really charming concepts. Aliens, robots, a lunar moon buggy, you name it. The one knock I have against this game is at the very beginning. It's one of a few games that have a really annoyingly obtuse opening. In this case, you have to go to a fireworks factory, and you can make different combinations of fireworks over and over, but the game doesn't indicate particularly well that the only way to move on to the actual game is to click on the butterfly outside. I guess it's a fairly noticeable background detail on account of the fact that it's one of the only things in the game that's consistently moving without you having to click on it, but still, if you don't know to click on it, it can take a while for it to click, and therefore it can take a while to get past this part. And I think anything that indicates poorly enough that even I get stuck on it for a while is not a good idea. Would this game rank this low if not for that? Well, considering the distance and quality for these games can be measured in nanometers, sometimes all it takes is one minor aspect. If I'm gonna be honest, I feel like Freddi Fish 4, The Case of the Hogfish Rustlers of Briny Gulch, is a slightly less interesting retread of the third game. It's not bad by any means, but it's just a bit derivative. Much like that game, you're looking for something that got stolen, in this case your cousin's hogfish, and eventually you have to interpret clues to find out who done it. I definitely like the Western vibes in this particular game, as it's a visual style that they don't often go to, and there are plenty of fun characters to meet, as they had to include a lot of different characters in order for there to be a selection to potentially accuse at the end. I'm particularly fond of Mr. Snailmail here. The puzzles are fun, and experiencing this game for the first time, it definitely wasn't as easy as it could have been. There were some times when you actually had to make some clever deduction, but everything makes sense. You're not combining plastic tube with a souvenir t-shirt to make a nuclear warhead, for example. Freddi Fish 4 was a pretty good game that could have been slightly better had it not been a bit of a retread, but it's a good retread if nothing else. Though there's no reason why the animation should have started to bug out like it did towards the end of the game.
Sahara Slim sending a telegram. The telegram said, keep them on ice. And then when we got here, there were big blocks of ice in with the hogfish.
Freddi Fish 5, The Case of the Creature of Coral Cove, and you gotta love that alliteration, is quite good. It's among the final games that Humongous Entertainment made before the dark times, and while it wasn't the most groundbreaking game you'll see, it has among the most solid foundation in the series. A creature has invaded the Coral Cove theme park, and you need to investigate it. I would say this game is almost perfectly split into 3 acts. The first act is finding your way into the park, the second act is investigating the park, and the third act is the sequence in the greedy land developer's mansion. For you see, the creature of Coral Cove was actually the legal owner, and the evil land developer was actually the one who illegally developed on it. So you need to break into his mansion and find the deed to prove the ownership of the land in possibly the most elaborate final sequence in any of these games. It definitely feels like the final boss of all these investigations in this particular series, having to go through a frankly elaborate sequence to shut down a tyrant. I would say the fact that a third of the game has you getting into the park and a third of the game has you breaking into someone's mansion means that the actual portion of the game where the investigation is taking place is somewhat truncated, which can be a bit annoying if that's what you came to these games for. I think the rest of the game makes up for it, and there's clearly a lot of effort on display here with all the different unique shop fronts that they had to make and all the various areas. Like most of these games, the character interactions are charming, as is the world around you. The twist is also fun, leading to one of the few instances in this genre where there's actually a developing story going on, rather than a straight A to B plot. This is a really solid time. It comes across like there's only so many ways to praise these games, but there's a reason for that, because most of them are consistently good for the exact same reason. But as far as games in this catalog, it kinda hits that sweet spot of not having any particular qualities that launch it to the top, but it still does everything right. Spy Fox, in some assembly required, is the lesser of the 3 Spy Fox games, and that's mostly for one reason. You spend most of the game in a single location, and said location isn't even that interesting. It's almost entirely set in a city fair, as the main villain is attempting to use a giant dog robot to wreak havoc once the total guest count reaches 1 million. Not exactly a dogfight in the outer reaches of space. These games are at their best when they have a lot of visual and thematic variety. This game does have some good puzzles, especially around the innards of the dog bot, and it has some good creativity. Much like the other Spy Fox games, it's far more elaborate than the other Junior Adventure games, as it's obviously aimed at a slightly older audience. You have multiple types of puzzles, different playthroughs will yield different paths, a smart sense of humor, plenty of fun characters, plenty of fun interactions, background details out the wazoo, you name it. But the only reason it's not closer to the top is simply because of the less than interesting subject matter and locations, which should tell you everything you need to know about the Spy Fox trilogy. Putt-Putt Saves the Zoo is to many the best game in the Putt-Putt series. Personally, it doesn't quite reach that height for me, but even though I disagree, I would say I completely understand why it would be considered someone's favorite. Because I would say it's the most pure distillation of the Junior Adventure concept that there ever was. You have a series of straightforward item exchanges and a series of tightly designed environments, and a few relatively decent but not mind-blowing puzzles. In this case, you have to solve a series of puzzles to rescue a bunch of baby animals, all of which are friggin' adorable and each have their own distinct personality. The different biomes in the zoo does create a lot of visual variety and tons of unique interactions. Fact is though, this game is almost straightforward to a fault. I'm not sure I would necessarily say it makes the game worse, but it makes the game slightly less interesting in that I basically knew what to do with every single item the moment I got them. Unlike the other games, which at least required a slight bit of deduction, I just found this game to be a bit on the easy side even by the standards of these games. Still, I don't think this game does anything exceptionally, but it does everything right. It's one of those cases where it's a nice smooth ride all the way through, and it has all the qualities you look for in these games to boot. Putt-Putt Joins the Circus, to me, is the best game in the Putt-Putt series, but that does come with a major asterisk. A major asterisk which I didn't know when I first played it, which is that there's only one playthrough's worth of content. As elaborate and multifaceted as these puzzles are in this game, once you've played it through once, there's nothing left to discover, but that still doesn't take away from the fact that there is a lot of multifaceted puzzle solving with plenty of varied item exchanges that, while intuitive, do have a lot of steps. And there's more characters and more puzzle variety here than pretty much the rest of the Putt-Putt games, and possibly more than the rest of the Junior Adventure games. I love the different circus occupations made into different vehicles mixed with various animals, which does bring up the point, this is a world with sentient vehicles and animals, but no humans. What happened to the humans? Is this like a post-human world where we tried to solve all our problems by use of sentient cars and then they became self-aware and killed us all? I don't know. This one's a tough one to place because it does definitely get worse on repeat playthroughs, but that first playthrough is better than any other Putt-Putt game in my opinion. If I only really want to play a game once, then what's better? One fantastic playthrough or 3 potentially good playthroughs? Freddi Fish and the Case of the Missing Kelp Seeds gave me nightmares growing up. I didn't quite know how to describe it when I first covered this game, but I've since learned of a subgenre of horror. A subgenre called liminal space, which is a subgenre of horror which attempts to invoke fear through large, eerie, empty spaces. That's this game in a nutshell. A lot of screens filled with vast open nothingness, and that combined with the gloomy undersea imagery led to this game being extremely eerie to a child. But I think that's part of what makes it so memorable. Visually, this game is very striking to the modern eye, plus the plot of having to save the fish from dying by getting the kelp seeds is very compelling, if slightly too dark plotline. And the puzzles. The puzzles are great, with the investigation and exploration leading you to several clues which all leads to a final sequence in a unique area. This to me was the first game that really set the tone for what a good Junior Adventure game was, because I feel like it's the first one to have a proper build-up to an ending sequence, rather than one that just kinda ends when you finish all the puzzles. The dynamic between Freddi and Luther was perfected right from the off. I love the shark antagonists and their boss, the Squid Father, even if it's a weirdly mature parody for the audience. And there are a lot of other fun characters in this game generally, like this guy.
Now you get the super duper dooka booka polygizmo.
Thank you for the super duper dooka booka polygizmo.
The first Freddi Fish game really set the tone right off the bat. And it's a quality time, though probably not if you're under the age of 6. Especially if you know how to get this secret cutscene.
What you thinking about, Freddy? Oh, nothing, Luther.
Didn't have a chance to bring that up before, but yeah, that's... wow. The third Spy Fox game, Spy Fox in Operation Ozone, is a return to form after the second game cocked things up slightly. A villain named Poodles Galore is attempting to destroy the ozone in order to sell super powerful sunscreen as a solution. Something that used to be satire but now is entirely plausible. And as a result, you have to go to multiple locations to find the necessary items to stop her. The puzzles are multifaceted and require a higher level of thought than the average game in this subgenre, like which type of clay you need to get using vague instructions, and that multi-stage puzzle to get a prickly pear cactus. And this game is sprawling, perhaps a bit too sprawling. I found that the multiple different areas means you do end up traveling around quite a lot, similar to Putt-Putt travels through time. It's not as bad as that, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't have ranked it this high, but it does fall into that particular trap. Plus, I also find that very similar to Putt-Putt 2, the introduction is convoluted enough that it was one of the few instances in any of these games that I actually had to look the solution up. So understand how good the rest of the game had to be for it to still rank this high despite those two issues. I would say it's a great game, but possibly a bit too much of an overcorrection from the second game, in spite of the fact that it still shows off all the strengths of the series and then some. Freddi Fish 3: The Case of the Stolen Conch Shell is possibly my most played game out of all these games, so its ranking here can largely be put down to nostalgia blindness. I'm kidding, of course. I do genuinely think that it's among the best executed games in this subgenre, even if the concept is not exponentially better than the other games in the series. Your Uncle Blenny has been arrested for suspicion of stealing the sacred conch shell, and now you have to find the conch shell and also the person who really stole it. Now, I remember this game having among the most variants as far as different playthroughs in the entire catalog of games, but aside from that, they also run the gamut as far as visual styles with all the different unique and varied areas you can go into. The puzzles are what you would expect, maybe a bit better. I'm particularly fond of helping this shipwrecked monkey, but I would say it's the characters that really sell this one, because you have something like 8 separate characters that can be accused of stealing the conch shell. The amount of unique major characters in this game leaves it bursting at the seams with personality, and there are multiple areas with elaborate animated or voiced scenes that have nothing to do with anything. It also has a fantastic ending sequence in what looks like an underground Mayan temple. Or underwater Mayan temple, my bad. It just feels like more production value went into this game. It goes to make The Case of the Stolen Conch Shell the most elaborate and generally enjoyable game in the series to me, because the number one thing I go to these games for are the aspects that fall under the blanket heading of production value. Characters' personality, animated sequences, etc. Something this game handles better than most. Pajama Sam 2: Thunder and Lightning Aren't So Frightening is another game that scared me as a kid, mostly because there was an impending sense of doom to this game, what with you causing a massive problem and Mother Nature coming to check things out, and Mother Nature also being a bit off-putting visually. What can I say, it feels like she's gonna be handing out punishments. But either way, I do think this game is great, but I think it's inched out as far as being the best Pajama Sam game. For no particular reason, if I'm being honest, it's more of just a gut feeling. Pajama Sam 2 has a ton of creative visuals, creative puzzles, and good variety. The subject matter is engaging and leads to a lot of interesting and creative ideas, from a machine that creates a weather simulation to a snowman that oversees the creation of every single snowflake, then a machine that shrinks the snowflakes. The hail warehouse, and even the things that don't necessarily have to do with weather are so fun. Like this boardroom, which is filled with a bunch of board members who are actual sentient wooden boards, except for the chairman, who's a literal chair. That's fucking brilliant. Or that scene where you can click multiple times to get multiple fun weather updates.
How's the weather?
There's a pink hurricane in the Sahara Desert.
How's the weather?
The thunder is squeaky in Peoria.
How's the weather?
The snow is falling up in the Ukraine.
I guess this was before anybody had to think about that country long enough to know it's just called Ukraine. Also, I didn't catch this until I watched someone do a reaction stream of my initial retrospective.
How's the weather?
It's hailing taxicabs in Texas.
Hailing taxicabs. That is such a great pun. Overall, it's just a fun time, and it has so much creativity and general funny moments that still crack me up to this day. Though I think there is one flaw with this game. That vending machine puzzle was so obtuse that it's one of the few instances where I actually had to look up the solution. So you know what, I guess if I were to blame this game's ranking being slightly lower than it maybe should, I guess I'd blame it on that. Despite being the only game in the Pajama Sam series that I didn't play as a kid, of those that count, I think the first game, No Need to Hide When It's Dark Outside, is the best. First of all, I love the aesthetic, the gloomy visuals and almost gothic architecture combined with the random items that belong to Sam, which really communicates that this is his mental manifestation of fear of the dark, while also still crossing over with reality on account of it being in his closet. So it contains a lot of his own items. Speaking of items, there are a lot of creative areas. I especially like the underground mines, the children yearn for them after all. The puzzles are creative, even if they are a bit easy, and it could not be overstated just how many entertaining characters there are in this game. It almost feels like the developers made the character selection on a stream of consciousness, because you have a kitchen with a bunch of singing appliances, a room full of dancing furniture, a couple of doors hosting a game show, or a boat that's afraid of the water and speaks with the voice of Peter Lorre.
That relieves the pressure, and all of a sudden, the hot water turns into steam and pow! It erupts out, along with all the colder water on top.
The game is just bursting with personality at every possible seam, and I cannot get enough of it. It's so unbelievably charming, even while the actual gameplay is nothing to write home about as an adult. Despite having no memories of it from childhood, other than maybe a demo, this is the game that I can remember the most about. As much as part of me was tempted to put one of my favorite junior adventure games from my childhood as number 1, Every Head Must Bow, Every Tongue Must Confess, Spy Fox in Dry Cereal, the first Spy Fox game is not just the best in the trilogy, but also the best junior adventure game generally, taking the standard junior adventure game and pushing it up to the next level. Closer to that of a traditional graphic adventure game, but not quite so complex that it becomes obnoxious outside of a few instances where the puzzle is not well explained. Featuring a host of fun interconnected locations in and around a Greek island, a host of fun characters, most notably Spy Fox himself, who has a fun nonchalant smugness about him, which makes every one of his dialogues entertaining.
I can't bear to pass up a deal like this. I'll take the teddy bear. Let me just get that for you.
And most importantly, a series of puzzles more complex and interesting than any game before and possibly after. Standard puzzles, conversation puzzles, gadget puzzles. And the standard puzzles are some of the most fun in the subgenre on account of the many that are more than just the usual item exchanges, requiring close observation and deduction. Combine that with a fun but absurd story about all the world's dairy milk being stolen in an effort to make goat milk reign supreme, and the fun tone and writing that these games at their best usually have, and you have easily the greatest junior adventure game of them all as far as I'm concerned. It's one of the few instances of a game in the Humongous catalog that feels like it could work as both a game for children and adults alike. I thoroughly enjoyed it and would play it again. Though I will say, as much as I think this trilogy of games is arguably the best work these devs ever did, well, having to do any sort of Google searches on it is like playing Minesweeper on maximum difficulty. Let's just say you can tell that this trilogy resulted in a lot of furry awakenings in my generation. And with that, let's move on. Well, that was fun. Now don't forget, a low ranking doesn't mean the game is bad. Outside of the bottom 5 or so, any number of these games could have moved up or down significantly with just a few tweaks. Maybe not even. If I heard a solid enough argument, I might be able to be convinced. I guess the thing to take away from this is that I'm not the biggest fan of mundane subject matter in these games, which I guess you got a lot of in the Putt-Putt series, hence why none of it really ranks at the top. Because outside of the fact that they're all cars, it tends to be relatively mundane adventures, and even when they're not, they usually have some sort of issue that prevents them from ranking higher. Meanwhile, half the Pajama Sam series ranks high because I love the imagination that those games employ, what with them essentially being set in the controlled chaos of a child's imagination. And they really succeed at nailing the tone, but at the end of the day I have to bow to the thing I enjoyed the most, and while Spy Fox doesn't necessarily have the best theming or imagination of these games, they're the most engaging games to play when you're outside of the core demographic, which admittedly probably makes this a bit of a flawed ranking to begin with on account of the fact that I'm not part of the core audience, but then again, everybody old enough to have played these games when they were new are now in their 30s, and as such, nobody is really in the core audience anymore. At least as it relates to the initial releases. So this is about as good as it's gonna get as far as rankings are concerned. Still, a lot of good stuff here, even if they don't quite resonate with me in the same way they used to. That's all I've got. If you like this video and want to support the channel, you can leave a like, subscribe, tell me what you think in the comment section, and hit the notification icon so you're always up to date on what I'm doing. I've been the King of Snark Style right here on Tactical Bacon Productions, and I will see you next time. Stay crispy, my friends.